Welcome back to Joyfully at Home. Today we are going to get a jump start on the fall craze of pumpkin spice. It is August and we're starting to see pumpkin spice come out everywhere again. You either love it or you hate it, and I guess you can fall somewhere in the middle too. So I'm myself am not a fan of pumpkin spice in coffee, but I do like pumpkin in about anything else. So today we are going to go ahead and make pumpkin cakesters. And what that is a version of, like you'll see in the stores, they might have Oreo cakesters, but this is a pumpkin cookie, nice soft fresh pumpkin cookie with a fluff icing center. And it's a sandwich cookie that's wonderful for going into fall. So we'll start with a whole stick of butter, which is a half a cup, and we will add to that a cup and a half of sugar. And then we'll cream those together in our mixer and get those incorporated together nicely. Make sure when you put your butter in that you have softened butter, not melted, but just softened to room temperature. Now you can see your texture of your creamed butter and sugar together. So now we are going to start adding all of our other ingredients. First, we will add 1 whole egg, and then we'll cream that into our butter and sugar. Now that we have our egg creamed in together with our sugar and our butter, we're going to start adding our other ingredients. We have a teaspoon of cinnamon, and I like to use the Saigon cinnamon just because it has a much more robust flavor of cinnamon. A half a teaspoon of nutmeg, teaspoon of baking soda, teaspoon of baking powder, half a teaspoon of salt, and then we will add 1 cup of pumpkin. And this is just pure pumpkin, not a pumpkin pie mix. You can actually, if you do your own pumpkins, you can use fresh pumpkin if you prefer that you've got made up, or you can use just pure canned pumpkin. That's perfectly fine in this recipe. So then you're going to go ahead and turn your mixer back on and blend all those together. Once you have all your spices and your leavening and your pumpkin in there, then we're just going to add our last ingredient, which is 2.5 cups of flour. All-purpose flour is just fine for this recipe. No need for any specialty flours or anything like that. Then we'll go ahead and we'll mix in our flour. So now that you have your cookie dough all set and ready, you'll want to have a greased, just lightly greased cookie sheet ready to make your cookies. I like to, for the sandwich cookies, I like to use a slightly bigger cookie scoop so you'll get a bigger cookie. You can just scoop these right out, nice level cookies, and you'll get anywhere between 12 sandwiches out of this recipe, depending on how large you make your cookie. But we'll go ahead and we'll get our cookies on our pan, and then we will bake them 350 degrees for about 18 minutes, depending on your oven. Could be as much as 20. But you'll want to make sure that your cookies are not brown. They're meant to be a very soft, cakey style cookie. And they're very, very soft and flavorful. So we'll get all of our cookies on this pan, and then we will set them in the oven to bake. Now that you have your cookies all set on your pan, you'll get them spaced out a couple of inches apart, and we'll put them in at our 350 degree preheated oven. And as I say, for about 18, maybe as much as 20 minutes, until they're just, you can touch them, they just spring back, just like you would a cake. They'll have that nice cakey soft texture. While our cookies are baking in the oven, we're going to go ahead now and we're going to get our icing made for the center. It's a little bit different than a regular buttercream, as it has your powdered sugar and your butter, but it also has marshmallow fluff, so it gives it that little bit of lightness and a little extra something to the center icing. So we just take another full stick of butter. First, we'll want to get that all beat up in our mixer so it's a nice texture. Okay, now next to our butter that we've gotten all nicely softened and mixed up, we'll take about half of a jar of 7-ounce, about a half of a 7-ounce jar. This one's slightly bigger, it's a 7.5 ounce, but you'll take about half of this jar of marshmallow fluff, add it to our butter, and yes, it will be a sticky bit of a mess, but it'll be worth it in the end. And this is the kind of recipe that if you're making more of these cookies, you can certainly double it. It's not a problem to do that. Next, to your butter and your fluff, you're going to add about 2 cups of powdered sugar. And then we'll mix those 3 ingredients together. At this point, you can also add flavorings if you like. You can add a little bit of extra vanilla. You could add, depending on the kind of cookie you're making, you could add any kind of flavoring. Even if you were making these as a chocolate cookie, you could add raspberry to this fluff icing. You could literally add about anything you want. To this, with the pumpkin, you can even add a little bit of cinnamon to it if you wanted a little extra punchy. It's entirely up to you, but I like this to be very simple for our pumpkin cookies for today. So now that we've got our icing all mixed up, it's a nice texture for the center of our cookies, nice and smooth. We'll go ahead and we'll wait till our cookies are done. We'll let them cool when they come out of the oven, and then we'll be able to sandwich them together with this nice marshmallow fluff icing. Now that our cookies are all perfectly done, you can see they're not brown, but they spring back a little bit to the touch, just a little bit, and they're nice and stiff along the edge. We're going to go ahead and just remove them to our cooling rack so they can cool nicely and be ready to fill with our fluff icing. So now that we have our fluff icing ready and we have our cookies set to cool, we will go ahead and get our icing all set to go in our pastry bag. And then we can put it in our pastry bag. I actually like to use a pastry bag for filling cookies. It gives you much more control over where your icing is going rather than just trying to use a knife. You can use a knife. I did that for many, many years, but a pastry bag gives you a little bit more control over how much icing and where it's going. So, and it gives you a neater looking cookie. So we'll go ahead, get our pastry bag filled. You just roll your top down if you haven't used a pastry bag before. Roll it down. And then once you're filled, you just push it down to the bottom and you cut your tip off when you're ready to use that. With something like this, you don't need a decorator tip because we're just going to fill cookies. So you just snip your end and get ready to fill. So now that you have your completed pumpkin cakesters all filled, nice bit of icing in there, and it's not an overly sweet icing, you have the perfect sandwich cookie for fall. Another thing to look forward to this fall is I'm going to be offering for the first time ever a bread making course. It's going to be my first paid course. So if you've ever had interest in learning how to make your own homemade bread and learning basics of yeast bread making, be on the lookout for that. I will have a promo up pretty soon when that becomes available, probably within the next month. So if it's something that you might be interested in, keep your eyes open for it.